I guess I've had a charmed career. In most cases, the artist came to me, and or maybe their representative came to me, and saying so and so really wants to work with you. I think the fact that I've been I'm known among artists as very serious about their work. It's about their work. It's not about them. It's always about the work, and always recognizing that their reputation is on the line when work is put out there, and therefore it's really important to present it with that respect and seriousness, and also to bring out things that they don't even know about the work. So my training in medieval comes in handy on this, in that I don't ask the artist to tell me what's going on in the work. I look at it, and I think about it, and I look at patterns. It's not so much what you tell me you're doing, what do you do over and over again? And if you were doing something over and over again and then you stop, why did you stop? Or if you tried some things once or twice and then put it aside, why didn't those work? Not asking them, I'm asking myself. Why did this artist make this decision and not this? Why did they change? What does it mean that they change? Is there any connection between the change and what they did originally? What is the continuity? What is the rupture? So it was really about delving into the work. I guess, let's see which was the first. The David Smith sculpture exhibition. A lot of these are out of my relationships from my former jobs. I mean, I basically came to Miami Beach to retire before I was 30. I had already headed the Rothko, curated the Rothko Foundation, director of the Lannan, where I was not only organizing exhibitions and purchasing work, but recommending major support for exhibitions, including the Kiefer retrospective in '88 that opened at Chicago at the Art Institute, and went to MoMA in Philadelphia. So I've been known in this field for a very long time, starting at a very early age, and I've always kept to a level of seriousness and dedication. And so the David Smith estate came to me and said, we'd love to work with you. And this was through a friendship with the daughters, with David Smith's daughters. And I came up with another way of thinking about his work. That's another thing, is I always go into it working with an established artist. They've been written about, they've been shown so much, they've said everything that has to be said, what could I possibly add to it? But by looking at the work from beginning to end, or possibly looking at a body of work that is lesser known, it sometimes tells me more than looking at their primary body of work. With Smith, there was most museums and galleries treat his work as three-dimensional drawing, and yet when he would install his work out in Bolton's Landing, upstate New York, it was out in a field, not up against walls, and there was an animation to it that I found very interesting, and in the studio as well. So at MoCA Miami, we had the option of having this great big space without any walls. So I had the idea of recreating the experience of being in a studio or out in the field, and emphasized the action element of his work. And actually, I think it was called Stop Action. And that was considered risky, to take the Smiths away from the wall, and it did put them in a completely different dynamic. It looked like they were all having a relationship with each other. It looked like they were coming out to shake your hand. So it did, so there's an example where they came to me knowing my background and my way of thinking differently about an artist's work, which was actually probably more true to what he was originally aiming for. And the same thing happened with the Roy Lichtenstein exhibition I did. The head of the foundation I had known from the National Gallery when I had worked on negotiating the gift of most of the Rothkos to the National Gallery. And he approached me and said, how about doing a Lichtenstein show? And I think we were standing on outside of the Frick one night after an event at the Frick. And I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. And again, started with this idea, what could I possibly add about Roy? And I started by looking, going through his archives at the foundation, looking at his sculptures, which hadn't gotten much attention, trying to figure out what's going on with these sculptures and how does it relate to the rest of the work. And at a certain point, it dawned on me that the work was dealing with perception. And I mentioned this to the curator of the foundation, who had been his studio assistant, and she said, oh yeah, that's exactly what he was doing. And he was very interested in studies of phenomenology and perception, and his instructor at Ohio State University. This is all what he was teaching, and that Roy had kept his books and this relationship right till the end of his life. And she started pulling all these books down from me, and there it was. That not only were these sculptures about perception, but all of his work was about perception and how we understand what we see. And he says this over and over again in his career, but no one paid attention. And he explains that the pop art pieces are actually abstract paintings overlaid on figuration. And that eventually, one of the reasons he picks the pop imagery is the comic imagery. He felt that it would lose meaning over the years. People the comics themselves would be so obscure that the future audience would recognize the abstraction. So I was able to nail, more specifically, what Lichtenstein was doing for his entire career, rather than the way he was just pigeonholed as a pop artist. He was never a pop artist. He was using the pop imagery as a way of understanding or complicating the viewing experience. Can you see abstraction and figuration at the same time? And there were a number of artists who were working on the same idea that he was friends with, Malcolm Morley and Richard Archwager. And actually, I worked with all those artists as well with major shows. The Stella exhibition, the exhibition of his work in the 1990s, nobody understood it. Nobody knew how to address it. A dealer at that who had shown some of that work at the time, that was Angela Westwater, Speroni Westwater Gallery in New York. She said, why don't you go over and go to Frank's studio, take a look at these, let me know what you think. Well, these are pretty monstrous, baroque, nothing like his minimal works that all of us had known. They were tough. They were really tough works. When I first saw them, first day I walked in, I said, I can't do anything with this. This is like, what do you do with this? And I walked in the next day, and it was like I had made a correction in my brain, and all of a sudden the logic of the work fell in place to me, and I said, oh my God, these are the most amazing, wonderful, beautiful works I've ever seen. And I decided, how did that happen in my brain, that I just made this minor adjustment and everything fell in place with the logic? And that's when I started working. And I was working with Stella for a long time, and at one point he said, you never asked me any questions. I said, why would I? You've answered every question, you've been asked every question, why would I ask you new questions? I'm looking at your work. And when I turned in my essay to him, one of the things I realized was that he was also doing what Lichtenstein was doing, dealing with perception. How does the mind understand what it sees? The same program that was in Ohio State that Lichtenstein had was actually duplicated in Princeton, where Stella was, even though he didn't take those programs up, but his peers did. So it was buzzed about there. So I realized Stella's famous line from, 1964, where he said, what you see is what you see, and most people interpret that with what's there is what's there and there's nothing more. I rethought it as what you see is how you comprehend what you see. And when he gave me back the essay, he underlined it like 3 times and said, yes, yes, yes. And by having that switch about what was he doing, everything fell in place.